Good evening, it's Tuesday the 16th of September and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Global economy. US and China reach tentative pact on future control of TikTok's American operations. Middle East. Arab and Islamic leaders convene in Qatar for emergency summit following Israeli strike in Doha. Wildlife conservation. New breakthrough with the chlamydia vaccine offers hope for the survival of Australia's endangered koala population.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Selina Jayathilaka.
Good evening once again. US and Chinese officials have reached a framework agreement on the future of TikTok's US operations, a move that could end a potential nationwide ban. President Donald Trump and Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are expected to finalize the deal during a phone call on Friday. The agreement aims to transfer US ownership away from its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, due to national security concerns.
Washington says the United States and China have reached a framework agreement on the future of TikTok's U.S. operations, a move that could end months of uncertainty over the popular social media platform. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent made the announcement during trade talks in Madrid, explaining that the framework lays the groundwork for American ownership of TikTok's U.S. arm.
We have a framework for a TikTok deal. The two leaders, President Trump and Party Chair Xi, will speak on Friday to complete the deal, but we do have a framework for a deal with TikTok.
In a post on his social media platform Truth Social, Trump wrote that the trade discussions had gone very well and would soon conclude. Without directly naming TikTok, he said an agreement had been reached with a certain company that young Americans were eager to see saved, and predicted they would be very happy with the outcome. China confirmed that a framework agreement exists, but insisted that any deal would not come at the expense of its national interests or its companies.
Regarding the TikTok issue, China consistently opposes the politicization, instrumentalization, and weaponization of scientific, technological, and economic and trade issues. China will never seek to reach any agreement at the expense of its principled stance, corporate interests, and international fairness and justice.
The talks come as a critical deadline approaches. Under bipartisan legislation passed by the U.S. Congress last year, TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance, must divest its American operations by September 17th or face a nationwide ban. The measure followed long-standing concerns in Washington that TikTok could share sensitive user data with Beijing, posing a national security threat. President Trump has already granted 3 extensions to the deadline, but pressure has continued to mount for a resolution. Trump also announced that he would hold phone talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday, while emphasizing the strong relations with Beijing. The phone talks could also spark a potential meeting between the two leaders during next month's APEC summit in South Korea.
In a fresh blow to US-China trade relations, China's market regulator, the State Administration for Market Regulation, has made a preliminary finding that American chip giant NVIDIA violated the country's anti-monopoly law. The finding is linked to NVIDIA's 2020 acquisition of Mellanox Technologies, a deal that was conditionally approved by China. The news comes amid ongoing trade talks between the two nations in Madrid.
China's market regulator has said that a preliminary investigation found that NVIDIA had violated the country's anti-monopoly law. It marks the latest hit for the US chip giant, which is known for its artificial intelligence and gaming chips. The brief statement did not elaborate on how NVIDIA might have violated the anti-monopoly laws. China in December launched an investigation into NVIDIA over what it said were suspected violations. The probe has widely been seen as a retaliatory shot against Washington's curbs on the Chinese chip sector. The regulator also said that the US chipmaker was suspected of violating commitments it made during its acquisition of Israeli chip designer Mellanox Technologies. NVIDIA did not immediately respond to a request for comment. According to China's antitrust law, companies can face fines of between 1% and 10% of their annual sales from the previous year. China generated $17 billion in revenue for NVIDIA in the fiscal year ending January, or 13% of total sales, based on its latest annual report. The The development comes as the US and China hold trade talks in Madrid. Chips, including the ones made by Nvidia, are expected to be on the agenda.
In Nepal, newly appointed Prime Minister Sushila Kaki has named 3 ministers to her interim cabinet following deadly protests that led to the dissolution of parliament. The new ministers Om Prakash, Rameshwar Prasad and Kulman Gising are all known for their anti-corruption stances and will govern until national elections in March.
The appointments are seen as a strategic move to restore public trust following the recent political upheaval. The new ministers are widely respected for their past work. Om Prakash Aryal, a human rights lawyer, has a strong record of taking on public interest cases, including a high-profile legal battle against a former head of an anti-graft body. Rameshwar Prasad Kanal, a former finance secretary, and has previously proposed major economic reforms. Kulman Gising, a popular figure, is credited with ending chronic power outages or loaded shedding during his time as a head of Nepal Electricity Authority. The interim government led by Prime Minister Karki, the country's first female leader, will have the challenging task of stabilizing the country and preparing for national elections within 6 months. The recent protests, spearheaded by Gen Z activists, were sparked by a short-lived social media ban but quickly grew into a broader movement against systematic corruption and economic hardships. The violence resulted in deaths of at least 72 people, and key public buildings including Parliament were set ablaze. President Ramachandra Paudel administered the oath to office to the new ministers, a ceremony that took place outside the fire-damaged presidential office. The appointments signal a commitment to good governance and accountability, which were central demands of the protesters. The interim administration's success will largely depend on its ability to address these deep-seated grievances and ensure that the upcoming elections are held in a free and fair environment.
In a significant ruling, India's Supreme Court has suspended key provisions of a contentious new law on Muslim Waqf properties. The court ruled that parts of the Waqf Act 2025 are unconstitutional, particularly those that allowed government officials to determine the ownership of these charitable properties.
The Supreme Court's decision addresses 2 of the most controversial provisions in the new law. The first provision, which the court found problematic, would have empowered a government-appointed district collector to rule on whether a disputed property was waqf or not. The court deemed this violation of the separation of powers, stating that the executive branch should not be able to determine the property rights of citizens. It ruled that such disputes must be handled by judicial or quasi-judicial bodies such as the waqf tribunals. The second provision stated by the court required a person to have practiced Islam for 5 years before they could donate a property as a waqf. The court expressed concern over the lack of clear mechanism to determine a person's faith, saying that it could lead to arbitrary decisions. The ruling is a partial victory for Muslim groups and opposition parties who had challenged the law. While the court did not stay the entire act, it put on hold the provisions that had sparked the most widespread criticism. The court also addressed the composition of Waqf boards, limiting the number of non-Muslim members to a maximum of 4 in the Central Council and 3 in state boards. It also directed that where possible the CEO of the board should be a Muslim. This aims to balance the government's stated goal of increasing transparency with the community's desire to maintain control over its religious properties. But the Janata Party-led government and argued that the new law was necessary to bring transparency to the management of Waqf properties, which are worth billions of dollars and are used for mosques, graveyards and orphanages. However, critics saw it as an attempt to undermine the rights of India's 200 million Muslims. The Supreme Court's decision to suspend these provisions demonstrates the judiciary's role in safeguarding the rights of citizens and upholding the Constitution. The court's interim order provides a measure of relief and sets a stage for a final hearing on the constitutional validity of the entire law.
In a move that could disadvantage South Korean auto exports, US tariffs on Japanese-made cars and parts have dropped to 15%. This is a sharp cut from the previous 27.5%. The decision comes as South Korea continues negotiations with Washington to finalize a trade deal that would secure the same lower rate. South Korea's trade minister is currently in Washington to address the issue.
A notice on the U.S. Federal Register has made it official. Today, U.S. time, the tariff on Japanese-made cars and auto parts will fall to 15%. That's a sharp drop from the 27.5% rate Japanese automakers had been paying, which included a 25% tariff under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. The decision immediately reshapes the competitive landscape in the U.S., one of the world's biggest auto markets. With negotiations on a $350 billion investment package ongoing, South Korean auto exports, the number one export to the U.S., will continue to face a 25% tariff. It leaves South Korean automakers, who are also subject to Section 232 tariffs, at a significant disadvantage, with South Korean and Japanese cars also competing in the same price groups. South Korea's Trade Minister Yo Han-gu is currently in Washington to finalize those talks. Negotiations have reportedly stalled over the terms of the investment deal. Minister Yo says he is focused on getting the lower rate applied as quickly as possible, but not at the expense of South Korea's national interest.
We are working to have the 15% rate applied as quickly as possible. This is a negotiation process, so rather than being swayed by every turn, we are focused on achieving a final result that we can accept.
Meanwhile, Yo also touched on the recent detention of Korean workers by U.S. immigration authorities at a Hyundai plant in Georgia.
It seems the U.S. side also feels its action was a bit excessive, and we will do our best to ensure the interests of our company are reflected.
The trade minister is expected to stay in Washington for 3 days as he works to finalize a deal on the critical tariff issue.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news coming right after this. Welcome back. Arab and Islamic leaders gathered in Qatar today for an emergency summit following an Israeli attack on Hamas leaders in Doha. The meeting, which included leaders from Iran and Turkey, aimed to show a united front and increase pressure on Israel, with the Qatari Prime Minister calling for Israel to be held accountable for its actions.
Barbaric state terror. That's how Qatar's Prime Minister described Israel's recent strike against Hamas leaders in Doha. He's calling for Israel to be punished, not just for the attack, but for the continued offensive in Gaza.
Israel should understand that its genocidal wars that target our brotherly Palestinians with the goal of uprooting them from their own land and displace them will not succeed, no matter what Israel says to justify it.
The deadly strike on the territory of a key US ally by another sparked a wave of outrage and criticism. It's led to an emergency summit in which leaders from Arab and Muslim-majority countries will be in Qatar. The gathering is a show of unity and support for the Gulf nation.
The message of this summit, which must reach everyone loud and clear, is solidarity with Qatar from the Arab and Islamic worlds against the aggression of the occupying Israeli state.
It's expected leaders will consider a draft resolution on the Israeli attack, which suggests a threat to the coexistence and efforts to normalise ties in the region.
Tensions between Russia and NATO have escalated after the Kremlin stated that the alliance is de facto at war with Russia due to its support for Ukraine. The declaration follows recent Russian drone incursions into the airspace of Poland and Romania, incidents that NATO allies believe are intended to test the alliance's resolve.
When NATO sent troops to shoot down drones in Poland's airspace last week, it was the first time its warplanes had directly engaged with Russian weaponry since World War II. Poland's foreign minister has told The Guardian the drones were not loaded with explosives. He believes the Kremlin was simply testing NATO's responsiveness.
Interestingly, they were all duds, which suggests to me that Russia tried to test us without starting a war.
On Saturday, another breach of NATO airspace, a Russian drone detected in Romanian skies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the incursion could not be a mistake and that it was an obvious expansion of the war by Russia. Moscow has not claimed either incursion was intentional. It has, however, taken aim at NATO.
NATO is de facto involved in this war. NATO provides both indirect and direct support to the Kyiv regime. Therefore, we can say with absolute certainty that NATO is at war with Russia.
What is not certain is how much the Trump administration will continue supporting its NATO allies. When it comes to further sanctioning Russia, he says he is willing to, but he wants Europe to act as well.
Look, Europe they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore.
Trump has yet to follow through on any of his repeated threats to impose tougher measures on Moscow. And alliance members have expressed uncertainty over his commitment to their defence in the incident of an actual attack.
A massive Russian attack on the southeastern Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia has left one person dead and at least 13 injured, according to Governor Ivan Fedorov. The strikes damaged numerous apartment buildings and homes, with 2 children among the wounded. The attack is the latest in a series of assaults targeting Ukrainian cities.
The overnight assault on Zaporizhia involved at least 10 strikes, reportedly from multiple rocket launch systems. This barrage hit 2 city districts, causing widespread fires and significant damage to civilian infrastructure. Governor Ivan Fedorov posted images of firefighters battling blazes in residential areas, underscoring the attack's impact on civilian life. The attacks not only damaged homes but also destroyed a service station and 2 trucks in a parking lot, highlighting the indiscriminate nature of the strikes. The city's emergency services reported a fire covering a large area, requiring a significant response from firefighters and emergency crews. The casualty count has fluctuated since the initial reports, but officials have confirmed 1 death and 13 injuries, with 2 outlets reporting higher numbers. 2 children were among those injured, a tragic reminder of the war's toll on the youngest and most vulnerable. According to the governor, the injured are being treated for various wounds, including concussions and shrapnel injuries. The ongoing nature of the conflict means that such attacks are nearly daily occurrences for the residents of Zaporizhia, which lies close to the front line and Russia-occupied part of the region. The attack comes amid a wider context of ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine. Ukraine's military has reported that Russian forces are intensifying their offensive in other regions as well. For its part, Russia continues to deny targeting civilians despite mounting evidence to the contrary. The attacks on Zaporizhia and other cities, as well as recent drone incursions into Polish and Romanian airspace, have heightened tensions with NATO, with the Kremlin recently declaring the alliance is de facto at war with Russia.
President Donald Trump has announced that the U.S. military has conducted a second strike on a vessel allegedly linked to a Venezuelan drug cartel, killing 3 people. The operation, which took place in international waters, comes 2 weeks after a similar strike that killed 11. The actions are part of an escalated effort to stop drug trafficking to the U.S.
President Donald Trump said the U.S. military carried out another strike on a Venezuelan drug cartel vessel that was on its way to the United States, the second such strike against a suspected drug boat in recent weeks. Trump's post on social media included a video, which appeared to show a vessel in a body of water exploding. Venezuela's government in the past accused the U.S. of AI manipulation. Reuters conducted initial checks on the video with an AI detection tool, but the video was partly blurred, making it impossible to confirm if the video was manipulated. Hours before the post, President Nicolas Maduro said the recent incidents were an aggression by the U.S.
No es una tensión.
This isn't tension, it is an aggression all down the line. It is judicial aggression when they criminalize us. It is political aggression with their daily threatening statements. It is both diplomatic and military aggression.
Y es una agresión en camino de carácter militar. Y
Venezuela is empowered by international law to confront this aggression comprehensively. It is not tension, it is aggression.
No es una tensión, es una agresión.
A U.S. military strike on September 2nd killed 11 people and sank a boat from Venezuela. Despite demands from U.S. Congress members that the government justified the action, the Trump administration has provided scant information about the attack. The Venezuelan government has said none of the people killed belonged to the Tren de Aragua gang, as the U.S. alleged. Trump said the second U.S. military strike on a Venezuelan drug cartel vessel had killed 3 men. adding that it occurred in international waters. The latest strikes come amid a large U.S. military buildup in the southern Caribbean.
Time for a short break now. We'll be right back with more world news. Welcome back. In a significant step for conservation, Australia has approved a world's first vaccine to combat chlamydia in koalas, a leading cause of population decline. The vaccine can now be administered by veterinarians in clinics and the wild, offering a new tool to protect the endangered marsupials from a disease that can cause blindness and infertility.
A national symbol of Australia, koalas are endangered. Experts say they could disappear from the Earth as early as 2050. One thing causing their population decline? Disease, specifically chlamydia. Now a vaccine has been approved to help them survive an infection.
So this is a really exciting day. Obviously, chlamydia is a major disease and threat for koalas, and today we've got a new tool, I think, a new management tool that we can use to hopefully reduce the levels of chlamydial disease affecting populations.
The Australian government has approved the vaccine to be administered by vets in hospitals, clinics, and the wild. The research shows the vaccine decreases the risk of a koala developing symptoms of chlamydia during breeding years, as well as mortality, by 65%. While the development is promising, experts say it won't entirely save the koalas from going extinct.
But looking at the data and the research out there of the broader koala populations that are unmanaged, it is quite distressing to see that they're in continuous decline with the habitat fragmentation, disease, and all the other threats that they face.
Officials say koalas have dramatically decreased in population in the past 20 years. They estimate there are about 100,000 left in the wild, and at most, 524,000 still in existence.
There's good news. As people celebrate a 100-year-old milestone, the analog photo booth invented by Anatole Josepho in 1925 is experiencing a major comeback. A new generation is embracing the nostalgic charm of the classic photo strip, choosing it over their phones to capture memories.
On the streets of New York, a new generation is discovering an old friend.
Oh, that one's so cute.
Old Friend is the name of this analog photo booth with a young fan base. Madeline Ruska insisted on spending her 13th birthday here. Fitting when you consider this revitalized relic is owned by a Gen Z couple. Brandon Minton and Zoe Lazarson say on a busy day, wait times for an $8 session can reach an hour.
People don't get to experience a tangible photo.
And that's why these antiques are growing in popularity, with about 200 now in circulation around the world.
Everything makes a comeback.
Brianna Conley Saxon is actually opening a photo booth gallery and museum in Manhattan called Auto Photo. The museum celebrates exactly 100 years since a man named Anatole Josepho invented the technology of pics. It's more than a snapshot, it's a century-long tradition that's still developing.
And with that, we come to the end of today's edition of World News Tonight. With the hopes of seeing you again, I'm Selena Jaitalaka, and we leave you tonight with the visuals of Birch experimenting with bold prints and textures. Also, don't forget to send us your feedback through email at feedback.ad24english@derana.lk or via WhatsApp at 076-805-7933. I'm Radhi Vikramasinghe. We'll be joining you next with the Nightly Business Report. Thank you for watching and have a good night.